So you probably know about what happened in Madison, Wisconsin at the Abundant Life School. I don't know if you read the girl's manifesto, but she calls herself a Hitler radfem, which is a radical feminist. And if this manifesto is real, then she believed that every male from baby to nursing home should be killed. Now, you don't get those ideas as a 15-year-old on your own. You are reading and being guided by certain websites and certain views, and you're being indoctrinated to a way of seeing the world. You don't get there on your own. So the book of Proverbs is a guiding, shaping book. It's the right guidance that we're supposed to have. It gives just broad wisdom on how to live life well. Simple things like, hey, if you go to dinner at a king's house, an important person's house, put a knife to your throat so you don't act like a glutton. Just like common sense, how to walk out things right. Don't take advantage of situations like that. It talks about things that fools do and warns don't do that because here are the repercussions of that. So it is divine guidance for society. Does Grants Pass need that? So Monday, we had this long budget meeting here as elders, and we were done, 3:45 or something. I needed to pick up some light bulbs for my wife. So Home Depot was the easiest place to go. So I go to Home Depot and I get some things. I've got they're in my hands, and I'm walking out the doors, the exit doors, and there is a lady, and I'm assuming she's from the J Street homeless camp, because that's just what she appears to be. She has a dog, and right in front of the doors, like right when you get out onto where the cars drive, her dog, which is this large pit bull, is just taking a dump right there. And so I kind of slow up a bit to see what's going to happen. And then she just walks off, leaving it. And so I looked at her and I pointed at it and I said, nice. Yeah, that's nice. And the move now is yell and cuss. That's the move. If you at all want to address something that you think is wrong, the move now is I'm going to yell at you and I'm going to say as many cuss words as I possibly can, maybe to make me feel ashamed or fearful or something. I don't have that gene, so I didn't have that problem. I just stood there pointing at it, just listening to her, pointing at it, right? And her dog, it must have been the God that did it. The dog stops again to take another dump, so she can't get away, right? So I said, listen, no one made you get a dog. You chose to get a dog, and when you chose to get a dog, you chose to take care of that dog and own that dog, and you own this right here. Are you gonna take care of it? And then a lot more cussing, and she said, mind your own business. Everything was much more colorful than I'm saying right now. Would be rated R if it was put in front of a screening. So I said, I am minding my own business. You see this right here? This is my business. This is my town. This is where I live, and that's wrong. And she just lights up, right? Cussing, just, and then finally her dog stops pooping so she can walk away from me. And then I'm sitting there going what should I do with this? Well, I've caused enough of a commotion that the Home Depot workers are coming out and they were cleaning it up. And my worry was this. Some nice lady, cart loaded up, Christmas gifts. Not gonna see that pile there. She's just gonna push her cart right through, step in it, get in her car, turn on her heater, and be like, what in the world just happened to me? That's what's wrong. What's wrong is you're selfish right now. You could care less about anyone else but you, and you're just leaving your problems for other people. See, we need a lot of Proverbs guidance today. And my hope is when we chose 8 weeks in Proverbs, my hope is that we get you intrigued by this book enough that maybe you'll grab it on your own and read it. Like one of the things that you listen to, all great Bible teachers, they'll say, almost every day I'll read a chapter of Proverbs. Just becomes part of this diet of the believer because of its shaping quality. So I'm grabbing chapter 25. In chapter 25, we'll open up and I'll read it. You'll see why it's a little bit unique. These also are Proverbs of Solomon, which the men of Hezekiah, king of Judah, copied. So I call chapter 25 the discovery proverb, because these, from chapter 25 and on, these proverbs were actually found 250 years after Solomon died by a new king, by Hezekiah. We know that Solomon wrote about 3,000 proverbs. Less than a third of them end up in the Bible. And part of the ones that end up in the Bible were actually discovered 250 years after Solomon had lived and died. And that's what we hit right now. These are the ones that God preserved to say, hey, they didn't make it in the first try, they'll make it in the second try. I'm gonna get them in chapter 25, discovery. Ever make discoveries that are just great? As a parent, the word perhaps was one of my favorite discoveries. When you're dealing with your kids, when you're at the busy checkout counter, and your kid is asking you, Dad or Mom, can I please get the Polly Pocket Princess Castle with the purple pinnacles? Please, please, please. It's the only thing I want. If I get this, I'll never ask for anything else. And you say to your daughter, at least I hope it's your daughter, perhaps. We'll talk about it later. Translation, when we get in the car and you're safely buckled and all the windows are rolled up, then I'll tell you no. And you can do whatever you want at that point. Perhaps. So in this chapter, there's a lot of like, wow. But I'm telling you, the Proverbs, they don't give up their meaning too easily. So if you remember from chapter 1, verse 6, it actually calls Proverbs the Hiddot in the Hebrew. It's translated the enigmas. It's translated the dark sayings. It's translated like, hey, this thing will not give up its meaning by just perusing over it. You're gonna need to get thoughtful, reread it, meditate on it, grab one proverb throughout the day and just think, what does this mean? What does this mean? You're gonna have to struggle. It's gonna take some time. Hopefully not 250 years, but it might take 25 days or 25 minutes. You have to spend some time on it to unpack the Hiddot hidden in the dark riddles of Proverbs. In fact, I would say the entirety of Scripture. But when you do that, when you are willing to put in that kind of time, when you're not spoon-fed something, guess what happens to that truth? You own it. It becomes a part of you. The word becomes flesh and dwells in you. It's a different kind of owning. It like captures you and transforms you. So it's the Hiddot. So this is the discovered Proverbs of Solomon. Verse 2. It is the glory, kavod, weight, substance. It's the glory of God to conceal things, Hiddots. But the glory, same word, kavod, of kings is to search things out. Discover the mystery of God. The prophet Isaiah said this, as far as the heavens are above the earth, that's how high my ways are above your ways. I think the church, maybe myself, we have lost the awe, the otherness of God. That we think we got it made now. We think we know it all. You know what bothers me about know-it-alls? Is that they think they know it all. That's what bothers me about know-it-alls. And I think there's an easy kind of trap with knowledge. We think, we got it down. So the book of Romans, arguably the Mount Everest of the New Testament. You might argue Ephesians, but Romans longer, more thorough in the theological subjects that it tackles. Brilliant, unbelievable, written by Paul. And here's what the Bible says about Paul's writing. They're difficult to read. So Peter hears that people are reading Paul. He's like, good luck with that, man. Tell me what you figured out, because I'm still trying to find it out. That's how hard it was. One of the greatest minds, right? Second greatest mind ever, probably when it comes to Christianity. Jesus, number one. Paul, close number two. Just amazing what that man came up with. You've got Romans, which is his magna opus. Theology all the way up to chapter 12. Then he gets really practical on. Listen to what he says at the very end of the greatest treatment theologically in the New Testament. Listen to what he says. It's Romans chapter 11, verse 33. I'll get there eventually. So he has 11 chapters of theology explaining the depths of grace and tie it into the Old Testament, into Abraham, into David, just brilliant. Psalms, quoting all over the place. Listen to what he says. Oh, the depths of the riches and wisdom and knowledge of God. How unsearchable are his judgments and how inscrutable his ways. For who has known the mind of the Lord, or who has been his counselor? What did Paul just say there? I just scratched the surface. God, the creator of everything that you see, spun the planets into existence, keeps them on track so they don't crash into each other and just create a giant black hole. Spun our solar system, spun our galaxy, spun the billions of galaxies into motion, keeps the universe on track, designed the mitosis of our cells that right now are dividing out and creating new DNA as we speak all over this planet, maybe on other planets, who knows? Designed by God, knows every chemical reaction to keep things in stasis, where they're stable and not falling apart. God. If you were to ask God, what are you doing? He would say all that. I'm holding it all together. And he might ask, and what are you doing, Matt? Not much compared to that. So Paul just says, Solomon, it's the kavod, the glory, the weight, the substance of God to conceal things. But the kavod, the glory, the weight, the substance of kings, rulers, leaders, is to search those things out. Have you ever, pondered how the Bible's been written? Because if I'm writing the Bible, chapter 1, the gospel, chapter 2, sanctification, chapter 3, justification, chapter 4, let's talk theodicy, chapter 5, let's talk suffering, chapter 5 or 6, let's talk heaven, chapter 7, let's talk, right? I'm gonna be just organize it. Is the Bible organized like that at all? No, it's very confusing, in fact. Why would God do that? I don't think God's looking for people to have an encyclopedia of knowledge about him. I think God is actually looking for a people that he might reveal himself to. Adam, I want to reveal myself to you. Noah, I want to reveal myself to you. Abraham, I'm going to reveal myself to you. Isaac, I'm going to reveal myself to you. Jacob, I'm going to reveal myself to you. Moses, I'm going to reveal myself to you. I think that's what actually God's looking for. God's not looking for people to just rattle off facts about him. So Paul in Philippians 3:10 says this. He says, that I might know him. Not know about him, not have facts about him, not be a cyber stalker, right? To have enough information to take advantage of that person because you got some info about him. Paul says, I don't want that. I want to know him. I want to know him. I think that's what God wants. People that want to know him. Yeah, facts are important in that, but they're not the end of it. You ever prayed like, God, reveal yourself to me. I wish I could know you better. It's Paul's prayer in Ephesians chapter 1, but his prayer is very interesting. He says, I'm praying that you might have the spirit of wisdom and understanding in the knowledge of God. Take that apart for a little while. That's just not facts. That's a spirit that gives you a wisdom about God and an understanding of God. Yes, based on the knowledge of him, but it goes beyond just knowing facts. It's you know who he is. And that takes time. It's the kavod of kings to search this. It takes time. One of my theological heroes, his name is Jonathan Edwards. Maybe they argued the greatest theologian that actually came up with theology, not copying or building on somebody else, but just greatest theologian America has ever produced. And he had this habit, tons of knowledge, man. You read that guy, thick. It's hard reading. Tons of knowledge. And he had this practice. At 3 a.m., he would saddle his horse, and for 2 hours, he would go out in the woods behind his house, and he would pray. And he did that for years and years and years. And one time he journals, only one time. He says, and if you know Jonathan Edwards, he would read his sermons like, if you ever seen Ferris Bueller's Day Off, like that teacher, Bueller. And he would do that, and this is the reason why. He says, I don't ever want my spirit, my passions, my energy to move people. I want only God to move them. So I am going to read my sermon in the most monotone voice I can. So I know it's not a work of the flesh. It's God doing this. And he's part of the great awakening where just thousands upon thousands of people get saved. And he's just up there. And the Lord said, glory. That's how he does it. So this guy, he's not a crazy dude. But he said that day he met God in the woods. God showed up. And he just talks about it in his journal. What happened? Man, the waiting was over. Not 250 years, but there's a discovery in that system, I won't call it a system, the discipline of him just saying, I'm gonna create space for God. And one day, God said, I'm gonna meet you in the woods today, and transformed his life. It is the glory of God to conceal a thing. Are we kings? You can be a king. How do you be a king according to verse 2? Man, you search the things out. You search it out. You give time to it. Verse 3. As the heavens for height and the earth for depth, so the heart of kings is unsearchable. Take away the dross from the silver, and the smith has material for a vessel. Discover purity. Get rid of impurities. Isn't that what that's saying right there? If you get rid of the impurities, then you have material that a smith can use to actually make something that is useful. You want to be useful to God? You want to have God's power in your life? Get rid of the dross. Purity leads to power. Even nature tells us this. So uranium-235 occurs naturally at 1%. If you find some uranium, you'll get 1% of it is uranium-235. It's essentially harmless, doesn't do anything. But if you enrich that uranium to just 4%, it becomes what's called reactor-grade uranium, and you can put it inside of a nuclear reactor, and you can fire it up, and you can create electricity, some power. But if you want real, powerful uranium, you have to enrich it not to 4% or 40%, you have to enrich it to 90%. And when uranium-235 is enriched to 90%, it is the most powerful substance known to man. It's weapons-grade uranium. The purer it gets, the more powerful it becomes. I think the same thing is true in a believer. that unrepentant sin in a believer blocks. Peter says this in 1 Peter chapter 3, verse 7. He says, listen, if you've treated your wife wrongly, God won't hear your prayers. Mark that down, husbands. You feel like God's not listening to you? That would be check number one. Because God's like, you take care of my daughter. Every dad knows that. You take care of my daughter. And God looks at his daughters and says, if the husband is not taking care of my daughter, Mom, he's not going to get anything from me. How brilliant is that? You look at these stories of the Old Testament. Achan, right? The nation of Israel, freed from Egypt through 40 years in the wilderness. They're coming into the promised land. They got power. They're just taking everybody out. They're told, don't take anything, burn it all. But this guy named Achan sees a Babylonian garment, some gold, some trinkets, and he can't help himself. So he takes it and hides it underneath his tent. And the next battle, Israel loses. The entire nation loses God's power to defeat the enemies because of one person's sin. It's what Paul will say in 1 Corinthians 5 about a man that was involved in sexual sin. He says, that man's sexual sin is leaven polluting the entire church body. You got to get him out. That's the power of sin. What a bummer. And so you see these things in the book of Acts where you see, man, that's radical. Acts chapter 5, there's some pollution coming in. Ananias and Sapphira are being hypocritical. They're acting more holy than they are, and they drop dead. What? God's serious about it. Purity. Acts chapter 19, there's all kinds of weird stuff happening. Demons are manifesting. Like these 7 sons of Sceva go in and they try to cast out this demon with this incantation. Hey, we cast you out. We're asking you by Jesus whom Paul preaches. And the demon's like, what? That's a problem if the demon says what to you. And it says the demon got in the man, trashed these 7 guys, and they ran out of the house naked. If you lose your pants in a fight, you know what that means? You lost. And so the church is like, whoa, this is real. And it says the church gathered together all their artifacts, Ouija board, just garbage. And they took them out and they burned them. And it was worth 50,000 day wages. So take how much you make in one day and multiply it by 50,000. And that's the amount of money the church said, we're burning this because this is serious. Okay? Can you buy an iPhone with the amount of money you make in a day? That's what they burned. Because that's how important it was to be pure. If there's sin in your life, go nuclear on it. Smash your computer, get rid of your phone. If someone's trying to sell you substances that are not good and they're gonna destroy you, give them the church phone number. Have them ask for me. I'll talk with them. I'd enjoy that. You're destroying a child of King Jesus. And Jesus says this, it's better that a millstone be tied around your neck and flung into the sea than to keep doing what you're doing to these kids. Mafia Jesus. Because he cares for his kids. Don't do that. Purity. The Puritans have some fantastic words. One of them is called mortification. It's from Romans 8:13. Mortify the deeds of the flesh. It literally means put them to death. Don't play with them. Don't think about it. It just mortify those deeds of the flesh. Put them to death because purity brings power. Well, how? How do I do that? How does dross get out of silver? Do you just ask it to get out? Do you beg it to get out? It's fire, right? Fire gets impurities out of silver. That's what happens. Don't run from fire. Don't run from difficulty. Sometimes it is the fire, it's the difficulty, it's the hard time. That's what actually purifies you. Paul in Romans chapter 5, verse 3 just says this, man, I glory in tribulation. I glory in that fire. Why? Because it produces endurance, and endurance produces character, and then character produces hope, and hope makes me never ashamed. You want to never be ashamed? Get the dross out. How do we get the dross out? No, hard times do it. It's part of just the process. James says something very similar. James 1:2, count it all joy when you fall into tribulation, when the fire gets turned up, because the trying of your faith produces patience, and let patience have her perfect work, that you might be complete and entire, lacking nothing. It's fire. I say this all the time. Hard's not bad. Hard's not bad. Hard could be the very thing that helps get rid, burn off, take care of that dross in your life so you become material, fit to make vessels of honor. Purity. Purity. Verse 5. Take away the wicked from the presence of the king, and his throne will be established in righteousness. Who you hang out with matters. Do not put yourself forward in the king's presence, or stand in the place of the great. For it's better to be told, come up here, than to be put lower in the presence of a noble. That's wisdom. What your eyes have seen, do not hastily bring into court. For what will you do in the end when your neighbor puts you to shame? Argue your case with your neighbor himself, and do not reveal another secret, lest he who hears you bring shame upon you, and your ill repute have no end. A word fitly spoken is like apples of gold in a setting of silver. Discover the power of sweet words. It's all, your neighbor has a problem, you can go deal with it, you can try to take it to court if you want to. So I'm gonna say, don't do that. Discover the power of sweet words. The content of what you say is important, but also how you say it is just as important. Honey, wife, we need a budget. Why? Because you're spending too much money. Honey, we need a budget. Why? Because I want to take you to Hawaii. Right? Same goal, very different way of presenting it. What we say, the content is 100% important, but how you say it just as important. So there was this psych student that had graduated, he had a master's degree, and then got called up because of a war, and he just performed experiments on everybody that was around. And part of his job at one point was to be the end of a mess hall and give people peaches. So he just started testing. At first he's like, you guys don't want peaches, do you? And when he said that, only 10% of the people took peaches. And then he changed it the next day. He's like, you want some peaches? And when he said, do you want some peaches, put the positive, 50% of the people took peaches. And then the third day he said this, 1 bowl or 2 bowls of peaches. 90% took the peaches. How we say things really, really matters. I am praying now, especially when I have someone that's coming and wanting to talk with me, I am beginning now, anytime I talk with people, with prayer. Give me wisdom, give me good ears, guard my tongue, help me to say these things in the correct way, help me to have good communication. You have an encyclopedia of hearing, I have an encyclopedia of speaking. I hope they come together in the right way. It's praying for the Spirit to guide my stuff, my words. Because I can say the right thing, but it's the wrong way, and it's just received wrong. It's just that simple. You need a budget like you're spending too much money. Okay. Jesus did this so brilliantly. Meets a woman, had been married 5 times. In that culture, it would be today meeting somebody that was married 50 times. You'd be like, what in the world? That's insane. That's that number 2,000 years ago. Married 5 times. The person she's living with is not her husband. She's probably trading sex for rent because no one wants to marry her anymore. Jesus meets her, has a conversation with her. Asks a question, hey, grab your husband. She replies, I don't have a husband. How does Jesus respond? You spend all the money. You evil, adulterous woman, you're shacking up with a man, right? Does Jesus do that? He goes, you've answered well in saying you don't have a husband because you've had 5 husbands and the man you're now living with is not your husband. In that, you've answered well. And she goes, I perceive you're a prophet. I bet you do. That's such a kind, generous answer. My prayers, I become a lot more like that. Discover the power of sweet words. That's all this entire section. How you talk to your neighbor, how you talk to people. Verse 12. Like a gold ring or an ornament of gold is a wise reprover to a listening ear. Like the cold of snow in the time of harvest is a faithful messenger to those who send him. He refreshes the soul of his master. Like clouds and wind without rain is a man who boasts of a gift he does not give. With patience, a ruler may be persuaded, and a soft tongue will break a bone. Discover patience. Verse 12 talks about someone that listens well. Someone that listens well, what do they have usually? If they're not always jumping in and like trying to get in a conversation, what are they demonstrating? The fact that they will actually stop and carefully listen to what you're saying. It's patience. They're just patient people. It's willing to wait. I'm willing to wait, God, right now for as long as necessary. You know the great people in the Bible all had to wait a long time? Abraham at 75 is told, hey, you're gonna have a kid. Doesn't happen until he's 99. That's a long time to wait. Moses waits 40 years in the desert. David is anointed at 16 to be king. He takes part of the kingdom at 33 and not the entire kingdom until he's 40. That's a long time to wait. Jesus knew at 12 at least that he's God in the flesh. He's in the temple. Parents are like, where are you at? They come find him. He goes, I'm going to be about my Father's business. Probably even earlier than that, but minimally 12. Doesn't take full-time ministry until he's 30. Paul, Acts chapter 9, gets saved, and he wants in, but he can't. He goes to Arabia for a little while, comes back, probably at least 10 years, maybe 12 years. Paul's put on the sideline and just told to wait. Now, why is that? I have this saying written at home. It's from Warren Wiersbe, a great, great Bible teacher. He says this, quote, if God puts something in my hand without first doing something in my heart, my character will lag behind my achievements, and that is the surest way to ruin, end quote. Or I put it, haste leads to waste. Abraham couldn't wait. And guess what happened? Ishmael. And there are still problems today because of that. Moses couldn't wait. And guess what happened? He murdered somebody and buried him in the sand. Paul couldn't wait, Acts chapter 9. We just did the book of Acts. And because of his just kind of, I gotta do this now. What happens? The entire church has problems, and eventually they have to just send him away. Get on a ship and go. We gotta get out of here. And then it says the church had peace and safety. Finally. Maybe for some of us, our prayer for 2025 is not, do great things through me. Maybe my prayer should be, do something great in me before you ever do something through me. Because I don't want to make a mistake like Abraham or Moses, right, down the line. Do something in me first. Work on me, my heart first. Do that. Discover patience. If you found honey, eat only enough for you, lest you have your fill of it and vomit it. You could do a sermon on every single one of these. It's like a discipline to not talk about every one. There's 28 sermons in this one chapter. Let your foot be seldom in your neighbor's house, lest he have his fill of you and hate you. I read this thing, it said, a good neighbor, when you come out, waves and says hello. A great neighbor, when you come out, turns around and goes back inside his house. I just cracked up. That's America right there. Don't talk to me. I don't want to talk to you either. My turn to be outside, you go inside. A man who bears false witness against his neighbor is like a war club or a sword or a sharp arrow. Trusting in a treacherous man in time of trouble is like a bad tooth or a foot that slips. Discover faithfulness. Don't be a treacherous man. Don't be a treacherous woman. When you rely on that person and there's treacherous unfaithfulness in them, it's like having a bad tooth and eating almonds. You're just like, ow. You ever broke some teeth up? So when I was 18, the last time I skied, I turned to snowboarding after this incident. I was at Mount Bachelor. So white out, I broke my goggles. I could not see. And I'm coming off the top, trying just to get down. That's all I was trying to do. And I've got a buddy, he's got goggles on, so he's like, come on, bro. I'm like, I cannot see. So I'm getting kind of, at the top, there's no trees, and you finally get down the tree, so you get a little bit better, like, all right, there's one side. So I'm going a little faster and a little faster and a little faster. I hit this jump, and then just smacked on a double. And my knee came up, hit my chin. It was a Friday night, and it broke 5 teeth in my mouth. So I couldn't get to the dentist until Monday. So for like 3 days, I'm just like, just drool all over my pillow. It was the most painful thing to endure. Like you couldn't do anything. Every time you breathed, it hurt. There's actually a disease, maybe you've heard of it. It's called trigeminal neuralgia. And it's the nerve that runs along your jawline into your teeth. And before modern medicine, that disease was called the suicide disease. Because the pain of that nerve is so intense, people would kill themselves because of the pain. This is what Solomon knew 3,000 years ago. There weren't dentists, there wasn't Novocaine, there wasn't whatever medications we have. That's what he's saying. That's how bad unfaithfulness is. I have a pretty simple philosophy. If I lean against somebody and they keep breaking, I just stop leaning on them. If someone doesn't show faithfulness, doesn't demonstrate they'll come through, there's only a couple times then you're just like, I can't trust that anymore. It's like a bad toothache. I'm sorry, I'm done. Paul puts it like this. It's 1 Corinthians 4:2. He said, it is required. Not as recommended, not as a good asset, not you should work on this. It is required. For stewards, anyone that's over something, you have stewardship of something. It's required of stewards to be found faithful. That's how important Paul put it. Paul doesn't put a lot of requirements on things. He put one there. If you want to be over something, number one requirement is be faithful. Be faithful. It's like Shamgar, one of David's mighty men. 2 Samuel chapter 23 just gives an account of these mighty men. And this is his story. He is to guard a plot of lentils. That's it. So he's there, he's camped out, he's guarding it. People are running by him. Enemies coming, dude, get out of here, Shamgar. Nope. My job is to guard this hill of beans. And I'm not leaving. Enemy comes, fights them all off. Because he was told, guard the hill of beans. And because he simply guarded a hill of beans, that was it. He ends up in the Bible as one of David's mighty men because he was found faithful. Like, that's better than Braveheart. Didn't have to paint himself blue and wear a skirt. Just, there it is. Faithful. It's if you give your word, you keep it. There's a saying that I think should be brought back into the vernacular of America. And it was, my word is my bond. I don't have to sign something. I don't need a lawyer. My word is my bond. If I give you my word, I'll be there. I'll do that. That's what faithful men do. Jephthah in the book of Judges makes a vow, rash vow, but he keeps it. Bad vow, but he keeps it. And because he kept his vow, the book of Hebrews chapter 11, the hall of faith grabs him and says, hall of faith for you. Why? Because his word was his bond. I kept my word. I gave it. I regret it now, but that doesn't mean anything. I don't get to change it because I regret it. I gave it. My word is my bond. Discover faithfulness. Verse 20. Whoever sings songs to a heavy heart is like one who takes off a garment on a cold day and like vinegar on soda. Real simple. Act appropriately. That's what that's saying. If someone is angry at you, you don't go tickle them. Because if they're concealed carry, you're dead. Act appropriately. It's just a brilliant way of putting it, though. If your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. And if he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For you will heap burning coals on his head, and Yahweh will reward you. Have you heard that before? Who quotes that? Paul in Romans chapter 12. Who in here knew that when Paul quotes that, he was quoting it from Solomon? Now that's the power of this book. The undiscovered Proverbs. Paul's like, that is it, man. It's talking about don't be overcome of vengeance. Don't be overcome of evil, right? When Paul's talking about that in Romans chapter 12. But overcome evil with good. How? Quotes right here. Here's how you do it. When your own enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. When he's thirsty, give him water to drink. And Yahweh will reward you. The word overcome actually in the Greek in Romans is a military term. It's saying your weapon, believer, the greatest weapon that you have in this battle against evil, in not getting vengeance, in all this stuff, the greatest weapon you have is good. That's your greatest weapon. So many years ago, I'm in Moses Palusa's house down in Rameshwaram, India, the southernmost part of the subcontinent. And he had on his wall there, just this plaster wall, the entire nation of India with all the states on it, different colors, painted on his wall. And I'm looking at them, and it's like the state we are in, Tamil Nadu, 5% Christian. Uttar Pradesh, 2% Christian. Just tiny fractions of people that believe in Jesus in this nation. And then I'm kind of going up, and then there's this state, it's called Nagaland. It's up toward the top on the eastern side, and it was 90% Christian. Everything else, 2%, 3%, that's it. And I'm like, what is that, did you forget a decimal point? 90%, what in the world? And he said, here's what happened there. He said 150 years ago, this Baptist missionary came there with his family and embedded himself in this community and started to share Jesus with them. And they killed him. And his wife and kids stayed put. And they watched her and watched the kids, waiting for vengeance, waiting for anger, waiting for something. But all they got was goodness and kindness. And they couldn't believe it. And so one by one in this village, people began to believe in Jesus, and their hearts were changed. And they went out from there. And now Nagaland is the most Christian state in the world. More than any Christian state in America, Nagaland is the most Christian state in the world. Because one person actually took seriously what the Bible says. Because kindness, it has this power to it. Have you heard of geometric multiplication? So if you took a piece of paper and you folded it in half 50 times, how thick would that folded piece of paper be? Who here thinks it would be 10 feet? Who thinks it would be 100 feet? Who thinks it would be 1,000 feet? Who thinks it'd be 1,000 miles? Who thinks it'd be less than 1,000 miles? Who thinks it would go from here to the sun? Because that's what it would do. What? Yeah, because it's geometric multiplication. It's your folding, it's doubling. It goes from 1 to 2, 2 to 4, 4 to 8, 8 to 16, 16 to 32, 32 to 64, 64 to 128, 128 to 256, 256 to 512, 512 to 1024, 1024 to 2048, 2048 to 4096. I can keep going, but I won't. 50 times. If you folded it 51 times, it would go to the sun and back. That's geometric multiplication. So I told that to Moses Palouse, and he handed me a piece of paper and said, show me. Like, well, it'd be a much bigger piece of paper. So when you are driving home, and you're trying to merge in and somebody kind of cuts you off and you respond to them by rolling down the window and yelling and screaming at them and giving them universal number one, and they yell and scream back at you and you're and both of you go home. And that guy goes home and he's just kind of tense because of this, and so he kicks the neighbor's dog and comes in and things aren't perfect at home, so he kind of is mad at his wife and kids are a little bit mad and they're grumpy and everybody's grumpy. That's geometric multiplication. But if instead you're like, bro, I'm so sorry, it was totally my bad. I'm a terrible driver. I shouldn't have my license. I'm sorry. You're totally in the right. And he goes home, and guess what happens? Who's happy then? Neighbor's dog is happy. I can get kicked. Wife's happy, kids are happy. It multiplies. Because it's little things that cause people to be set off and take just a grit to them, and then everything is amplified, and there's actually, it's been proven, there are chemicals in your body that stay there. They're residually there, just waiting to be either capped for happiness or waiting to be capped for anger, just waiting. And if you're all primed with happiness, man, the guy was so nice to me, I can't believe it. Wow, you come home primed for happiness. On the other side, you come home primed for anger. So Paul, quoting Solomon, says, if your enemy is hungry, give him bread to eat. And if he is thirsty, give him water to drink. For you will heap burning coals on his head. That's a positive thing. And Yahweh will reward you. May God give us wisdom. May Proverbs be shaping us into a different kind of people. Jesus, forgive me, or I have not obeyed and used the weapon of goodness, or I have not used a kind answer to turn away wrath. Forgive me. May you reshape Matt Heverly's heart even tonight by this text. I pray that for every person in here. May we go from here utilizing the weapon of goodness. And we ask this in your name. Amen. God bless you guys.